What's going on, my fellow Kino Lords? So today I'm going to be reviewing Presence, which is a film that's directed by Steven Soderbergh. So Presence is a film that I was quite keen to check out because conceptually I thought it sounded really refreshing and really cool. If you don't know what this movie is conceptually, um, the whole entire movie is brought to you from the perspective of the ghost. So the entire film are like first person point of view shots of the ghost that is haunting this family. And I thought, that sounds really dope. Let's see what Steven Soderbergh can cook up with this concept. And Steven Soderbergh is a filmmaker who, I swear to God, he's like a workaholic. Like, this dude is always pumping out movies. Like, on average, he comes out with like 2 movies a year, sometimes even 3. And I'm just like, damn, how does this guy have the energy to do all this shit? But yeah, but you know what? Even though some people say Soderbergh is quantity over quality, I kind of respect the fact that even though he makes a lot of movies, he's not always just going for cash grab bullshit. Like, from time to time, he'll actually try to put something out unique and bring something new to the table. And Presence is one of those movies. So I was like, let's check this movie out. And after watching it, I can say that I enjoy this movie quite a bit. Um, and before I dive into my thoughts deeply about it, um, I think the reaction to this movie, if I'm correct, is that a lot of casual audiences, or just like the general audience, if you will, who watch this movie solely based on advertising, I heard overall just have not liked this movie. And in a way, I can kind of understand it because it's being more marketed as a horror movie. And in my opinion, this is definitely not a horror movie. This is more of like a dark psychological drama with like a paranormal twist. If that's what you would call horror, then fine. But to me, there's not enough horror vibes. I mean, it is quietly unsettling, but it's definitely not. There's not enough here for me to call this a horror movie, just from my perspective. Um, so I think that's the reason why people are coming, and also because of the fact that this does have an experimental style to it. There's a lot of most of this movie just comprises of characters speaking with each other, and then eventually kind of feeling a presence in the house. And again, I could see like general audiences being like, "What the fuck? This movie is boring," and just walk out of the theater. But again, as I mentioned, personally, I thought this movie was quite good. I think it offers a lot for you to chew on and to reflect on. And I think that the overall vibe of it really, really works. And that's huge thanks to the direction of the camera. I think that is probably the brightest spot of this movie. It's not the only good thing, but I think that is the most effective part of the movie is the presentation and the concept. Um, and even though I did really like this movie, I'm not completely in love with everything. There's a good handful of things about this movie that I thought either just didn't work or just thought could have been done a whole lot better. Um, but before I get down to the negatives, I want to hark back to the cinematography in this film. And let me tell you, like, I love the flow of this movie. I think from start to finish, this movie is so fucking smooth. And I love just the way that the camera moves throughout the film. I mean, it's basically compiled of a series of long takes. Not every time are we getting like insanely long takes. Because like every now and again it'll like hard cut to black and then move on. Like it'll like do a little leap in time into the next part of the story. Um, but from my memory, like every time we do get a scene, it's a long take. And I mean, this camera moves all throughout the house so swiftly and all over the place. And I haven't done any research into like the making of this movie or anything. But to me, just from looking at it, it seems like at the very least, like 90% of this movie was done just using natural daylight, or just like natural light, period. Because again, this camera is like moving in every single direction around the house, and there's just like no room to hide any like lighting setups or anything. So it does seem to me that they used natural light for at least the vast majority of this movie, and I think that's very impressive, and I think works towards the film's advantage because it's not the most brightly lit movie. And I think it makes not only the aesthetic feel more natural, like you yourself are in this house, but also just makes it kind of increases that more like natural, ominous feeling to it. Because the fact that it is shot and directed from the point of view of the ghost that's haunting the house, as I mentioned, it does feel quietly unsettling because of the fact that it does have this voyeuristic attitude about it, to where, um, you know, the ghost, and we are pretty much put in the perspective of the ghost by its very nature. So it's like we are peeking in onto this family's drama, in a way that is unsettling because you, at the same time, feel like if you were being haunted, it feels very violating, to say, what if there was some kind of ghostly agent that was watching over every little thing that you do in your life. The whole concept of privacy just goes completely out the window, and that alone is a little bit unsettling to me personally. Um, but but yeah, like I do think the direction of the camera, the way it's presented, like it does, even though it's not a horror movie, it does feel ominous and it does feel unsettling, and I think that is the best aspect of the movie, in my opinion. But I also do like the character writing and the dynamic of the characters, because what we have in this family is basically like a mama's boy and a daddy's girl dynamic. And that's kind of minimizing what it actually is, but like on the surface, that is what it is. Um, and like you have not only the son that favors the mother, but the mother also favors the son. And you have the dad who I don't think favors the daughter, but almost feels like he has to, be the parent here because the mother is so emotionally neglectful to her. And I think that again the character writing all around is very effective because it shows you the kind like how being emotionally distant as a parent and choosing favorite children causes so much dysfunction and mental health problems. And again, overall, like I really do like the kind of clash that is brought upon this kind of dynamic within the family. Um, and and yeah, like again, I think the character writing is very good. But when it comes to, oh, before I get to the negatives, one thing I have to say that is a huge positive of this movie, and it's actually like my favorite like scene of the movie, if you will, is the very end. I think the last scene of this movie, the last like scene shot, whatever you want to call it, so effective, incredibly harrowing, gave me actual chills. And I know like people say, "Oh, that gave me chills," but they mean it like, as a, they mean it like metaphorically and just like as a figure of speech. No, like this actually genuinely gave me real chills. And I can't remember the last time a movie made me feel that. So, like, huge props to the ending and just the way that was directed and shot. And, like, again, I think what it meant thematically and conceptually, I just think it's so good. Like, it is just presented so well. It really did it correctly, really did it the best way it possibly could have been, and it just really hit home. And so, yeah, the ending is so good, in my opinion. Um, but But yeah, so with all the positives out of the way, let's talk about the negatives. So I'm just gonna outright say this: I don't think the acting in this movie is all that spectacular, um, and I don't really think it's the actors' fault, really. And I'm not saying like they're all bad all the time, um, but it's less about the performances themselves, but the way that they're being directed. Um, because the way that they deliver lines and the way that the lines are written and the way that they are reacting to things, to each other and to the ghost, sometimes feels way too sharp. Like, it's either one, like, really on the nose really quickly, like dialogue that is just here so the audience can understand context of what's going on and understand backstory. Like, it feels like, okay, this is the scene for that, and then we move on, and then okay, here's the scene for that, and then let's move on. And again, sometimes the way that the characters are interacting, it doesn't feel the most natural because of not only the way the lines are written, but how they're kind of going back and forth too fast. And I feel like a lot of the dialogue exchanges needed to have, better pace to them. I think some pausing in between lines would have really helped it, made it make it feel more authentic and genuine. Um, and yeah, like, just I think the way that, again, characters react to things feels very like movie like, and I think that's like a huge problem with the movie because again, it kind of like makes it feel less authentic and less natural. Um, and there's like something that happens like at the very end that not at the very end, like the last shot or anything, but like before we get to that harrowing scene I mentioned in the very end, that it just feels, I don't know, it feels very like quick and forced. Like, I'll just say it's a something really integral happens to a main character in the movie, and it feels kind of for like the actual result of what happens, the cause and effect feels really forced and quick, and I don't know, there just needed to be a better sense of natural direction in the movie. Because I don't really think it's the actor's fault, and at times they give great performances. Lucy Liu at the very end gives a fucking great performance, and I mean throughout the film she's really good in the movie. And the dad character in this movie, I thought he was really good too. Um, so yeah, like, I just think that was a part of the. I think that was probably the most underwhelming part of the movie because sometimes it would just like take you out, and that's unfortunate because I do think like the flow and like the aesthetic and the concept of it like amplifies what this movie is, but then it kind of gets brought down by elements of it that does kind of just feel like a movie and it feels a little bit phony. Um, and let's see what else. And this isn't really a negative, but just be prepared for it. Um, a lot of the drama in this movie, and a lot of the focus is among teenage characters, and you have the daughter character in this movie who is basically the main character, and she meets this boy through her brother, and there's he's basically like he basically plays this very like this super cringy edgelord, like, I guess villain of the movie. And to hear like him spiel all this dialogue and then the back and forth dialogue that he has with the main daughter character of the movie, she also kind of has some, angsty teen cringe dialogue, and there's like big segments of that at times, and at first I was like, oh, this is kind of hard to sit through, but they are teenagers, and if they actually were saying like really, deep and thoughtful things, not saying that they can't say thoughtful things, but it's like the delivery through the teenage angst can be kind of cringe, and it wouldn't be natural if it almost wasn't edgy and cringe because they are teenagers and that's how they are. So I don't want to put that against the movie because technically it did do a good job at writing the dialogue in a way that is believable. Like, again, as if we're the ghost peering in on teenagers, talking deep or whatever, and or like talking about their problems and how they feel, and they have this very like edgy way of viewing the world and their problems and everything. That was something I just think it was a little bit hard for me to sit through, but I think it makes a lot of sense towards the movie. And it's not really a negative because I understand why it's written that way. But just be prepared for that. Um, and one other thing too is that God gets brought up in this movie, like not many times, just like twice. And I'm not a full fan of how it was incorporated, mostly because it gets introduced through this sidekick character who we come to know is legit and like really does have powers because she actually is like interacting and feeling the actual presence of the ghost in the house. So we know that she is not full of shit. But she brings up you know she I'll just say she brings up God, and it's one thing. It's like, okay, and then like later on the father, he is also talking to her daughter about he used to know things but now he doesn't, and God gets brought up again. And I wouldn't have minded that. Like, I think it is interesting to see how people having like these kind of supernatural experiences with reality changes the way they view reality and the world, and can lead to a more of a religious minded way of thinking. I think that is a actually interesting human examination there. But I I'm not a fan of how, like, since the psychic character kind of gets established as having like actual superior knowledge over all the characters in the movie, she's the one that brings up God, so it kind of makes it to where, you know, that she's correct about God being real or whatever. So it just felt weird to do that. Maybe if the psychic character didn't bring it up, and and we only had that scene with the father bringing it up, I think that would have been more interesting and more thoughtful. Um, but yeah, yeah, I think that's really it. That's I talked longer about this movie than I expected, but I think that's really it. Um, yeah, I think overall was an effective movie. I like that. Steven Soderbergh is still trying new things, and gave us a movie that is to me like kind of refreshing, and I thought it worked quite well. And even though it could have been better in certain ways, I'm satisfied with what I saw, and I think he fucking killed it with that ending. Amazing ending. Um, Now that to me is a bit horror. Like, the ending is technically like, I mean, it's dark drama, but that's all combines it with like a horror element that I think works very well. So yeah. Oh, by the way, Julia Fox is in this movie. She was on screen. I was like, is that the Julia Fox? um, yeah, but she's not in the movie long. She plays like a real estate agent for a little bit, but that's it. Um, but yeah, so that's it, guys. What would I rate Presence? I think I feel pretty comfortable rating Presence a solid 7, solid to strong 7 out of 10. It feels about right to me. I don't really see my rating going up or down on rewatch. I feel it's gonna stay the same. Um, but I definitely enjoyed it. I'm definitely satisfied with the product. So, yeah, that's all I'll say about the movie, guys. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, like, genuinely, because I know that this movie's been a bit polarizing since it came out, and wondering just what film lovers like you and I think about this movie. But anyway, that's all I got to say about Presence. If you really enjoy how to say about the films, give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.